Machynlleth in Montgomeryshire, our postcard today from a very famous prince, Owain Glyndwr. Now, Geraint, where are we at the moment?
Right, you're in the Owain Glyndwr Institute on Maen Gwyn Street in Machynlleth. And this is where, if you like, the beginning of Owain's reign as a statesman really began in 1404. He came here to hold his House of Commons, and as Hywel Dda had done in the 10th century, invited 4 men from every, what they called a cumud, to come here. So you're talking about 400 commoners meeting roughly on this site with a building similar to this.
But a bigger table and more chairs.
Bigger table, more chairs, yes.
So what do we know then about the man? What put him in a position that he had to hold a parliament?
Right, he was a squire. He wasn't a knight, but he was a squire, an educated man. He'd studied law in the Inns of Court in London. And then he entered into a dispute with Lord Grey of Ruthin, and he owned land nearby to Lord Grey. And to cut a long story short, they ended up fighting. Lord Grey turned Henry IV against Owain Glyndwr. So in view of the social and economic conditions at the time, it snowballed, and if you like, a local land dispute ended up with the last great Welsh War of Independence.
So it was it an England versus Wales thing, or an ancient Britain's Welsh versus a Norman thing?
It was more on that line, yes. It wasn't Welsh and English because the Welsh were very supportive of Richard I, who was their king, not Henry IV, who they saw as an upstart. So it was very much, yes, the Welsh gentry clashing with a landowner with English leanings. So what then led him to becoming such a supreme Welsh nationalist, if you like? This is the thread that runs throughout his reign, which is he was the son of prophecy. He was the long-awaited Welsh Messiah. And many of the Welsh princes would have struggled with that role, and I'm sure Owain Glyndwr did as well. So when he came to this building, he would have thought, well, you know, is it me? Am I the long-awaited one? But it was the prophecy of Merlin, the prophecy of the long-awaited Welsh Messiah, and the Welsh people 100% united with him. Obviously those with more of an Anglo-Norman leaning would have opposed him and supported Henry IV. So he was the son of prophecy, the awaited one.
Why did he choose Machynlleth as his centre, his capital?
Right, it was this valley, the Dyfi Valley, going back at least to the 6th century, if not BC, that was the, if you like, the no man's land in Welsh history. This particular valley wasn't north, wasn't south, wasn't east or west, and yet was north, east, south and west. The leaders could come here and not feel that they were leaving their own land. When they came here, they would drop their swords, they would not fight, and they would come to debate. So Owain had this, I would almost say, a mythical and mystical tradition in his blood, so there was no other place. What reinforced it was the fact that the 2 main castles that he held was Aberystwyth and Harlech. So this was a second reason to coming to this valley. He was in between those 2 as well. So a deeply mystical part of our Welsh heritage, and a lovely place to visit any time of the year.
So what was Owain Glyndwr's demise in the end? How long did he have and hold power here in Machynlleth, and how long did he remain in this position as a thorn in the side of the Normans?
Right, he would have been crowned here as part of the House of Commons in 1404. He would have then begun to look at the reality of ruling a free Wales. And then within the 2 years, March 1406, he would come back to this area, to Pennow this time, to his Chapel Royal, to begin to be the statesman in the full sense of the word. Sadly, by the beginning of 1407, yes, he was on the way down.
So where did he meet his final end? Where can we go and visit him? Where was his place of death?
Yeah.
Is there now a place of pilgrimage?
We don't know. It's the same as King Arthur. Where did he die? When did he die? We don't know. He would have, most historians believe he would have ended up with his daughters, 1 or 2 of them. My own personal feeling is that he didn't want to be found. He didn't take the royal pardon, and like King Arthur, he melted away into the landscape and into the mist of history. So we'll never know.
seated here in a building that doesn't look very churchy to me, apart from the fact you have a cross, and a very impressive painting behind. What's it all about?
Right, this was the site of Owain Glyndwr's last Senate, his last Parliament, and when he came here in 1406 during March, it was a House of Lords. He was now drawing the elite of the nation together, secular and religious. So they met here to discuss the, if you like, the brass tacks of what they wanted for a free Wales. And in this painting, Aneurin Jones, one of our most famous living Welsh artists, has commemorated the last Parliament.
Oh, so that's what it is. So which one is Owain?
So Owain is on the horse,
yeah.
And because he was following the tradition of the Middle Ages, many people, local and national, have been featured in the faces of the characters, but nobody was worthy enough to be Owain Glyndwr. So we've got the shadow on the face there. All the religious orders in the day, Franciscans, Dominicans, and the Cistercian Dominicans and Franciscans, they all supported Owain Glyndwr against Henry IV. The Franciscans hated Henry IV for some reason, so they all came here to be part of the Parliament. So he's worked them into, among the soldiers in the background, these very important outlaw clerics.
And is this the original building we're in?
The original building, we don't know how big it was, probably this size. All that's left from that period is the roof, which was put up within a century of Owain Glyndwr of 1406. So you're talking early 16th century. The building has been adapted over the years, but what is important in Pennal is this was his Chapel Royal. And by some coincidence, the Chapel Royal in the Tower of London is also St. Peter ad Vincula, Peter in chains. So that makes this church unique in Wales. So this is the actual site of that building, and without any doubt, Owain Glyndwr, being a devout Catholic, would have met here not only to discuss matters of state, but would have had the Mass said for him and would have had the Mass received near the front of the church. So it's a very important building in Welsh history.
Do you know, it's a very interesting thing you said there about him being a devout Roman Catholic, because many people the world over will have this perception of the Welsh or the ancient Britons being very bardic, druidic, in their robes, and they wouldn't have thought of him, for instance, or indeed anybody else in this part of these islands, as being necessarily Christian.
Oh yes, I mean, he was a very devout Catholic. He would have had his Merlin character, we know that, and interestingly, he was known as the Scab. I dread to think where the Scab was, but yes, he was a devout Catholic and was accepted not only as a devout Catholic, but as a leading statesman in the Europe of the day. You know, this mentality of a very parochial Welshness. No, they were Europeans long before we talked about the EU.
You know, you've mentioned in our chat two very interesting things here. The Europeanness of all of this. And this Peter ad Vincula is an unusual term. Peter in chains, I think it means. And I actually went to Rome and saw that statue and the link with the Tower of London. And of course, the letter, the Pennal letter. Tell us about that, because that really was showing a European alliance forming between Wales and the rest of the continent.
Yes, you know, it is an interesting link, yes. As you said, religiously, London and Rome. The letter went to Avignon, and then it ended up, certainly the French have always been, yes, very bureaucratic, so everything is kept, every letter. If they weren't that type of mentality, then the Pennal letter would have disappeared. But they keep everything and kept everything. So the letter went to Charles VI of France, and Benedict XIII was the Avignon Pope. And it went with two emissaries from Pennal, probably by horseback and then obviously by ship. And it was received by the French. They sent some support, but not enough. And as the Welsh joke, we're still waiting for the reply. But at least they did reply in kind. Not enough soldiers, and when they met up with the Welsh troops on the way to fight a big battle in the Midlands, because the French were drilled in this idea of chivalry and King Arthur, they said, well, wait a minute, we want to go off to Caerleon to see King Arthur's Round Table, and off they went. Almost on a sort of a travelogue, you know, in the middle of this, what should have been a big battle, and that battle the Welsh lost, and that was the beginning of the end. So the French supported us, if you like, in terms of the diplomatic, verbal support. But sadly, the military support was not sufficient.
So the letter itself then was a plea, a request?
It was a plea for support from the French, but at the heart of it, Owain was telling the French king, if I support you, then I want your support to give me 2 universities to train my people. I want the Mother Church to be in St David's, not in Canterbury, a free Welsh church. I want Welsh revenue to stay in Wales, because all the Welsh revenue in those days would have gone to support institutions, monasteries and churches in England. And then finally, I want my priests, through their education, to speak Welsh. So that was quite a visionary claim and a demand to make in 1406. Most of those things have now come about, and I wonder how Owain Glyndwr would have reacted, when he saw the devolution and the vote. Not full power, but at least it's almost there.